Hello, and welcome everyone to the second Conference 21 weekly roundtable. We have four of our fantastic speakers. We'll be giving the chance to introduce themselves momentarily. I am Michael Whitehouse. I am the founder and chairperson of Conference 21. We also have Lois, Koffi, Bridget Brown, Angelus Perez, and Christine Rose. Let's quickly give you each a moment to introduce yourself and what you do and what makes you awesome. We'll go counterclockwise to begin with, and then we'll go clockwise on topic. So, Angelus, lead us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello there, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I'm very glad and honored. My name is Angelus Perez. I work for a company I helped found called Success Genie LLC. I'm a mindset coach who specializes in communication and leadership strategy. And I'm located in Milford, Connecticut. Do I need to say more? I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. All right. And Christine.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Rose. I am a business and executive coach and own a firm based in the greater Seattle area, Christine Rose Coaching and Consulting, where we've been helping CEOs of companies from $1 million and up to grow leadership, grow innovative and effective teams, and to grow value in their companies as they're getting ready to hand off to the next leadership team.
All right, fantastic. And Bridget, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am Bridget Brown. I'm the owner and founder of Story Matters, and I'm a communications training company. We work in the areas of communication in businesses and as well as coaching individuals in the areas of unconscious bias, interpersonal communication, storytelling, and public speaking.
Thank you. Very exciting to have you with us. And Lois.
Hey guys, everyone. Lois, Koffi, sales trainer and podcaster here in usually sunny San Diego, but we're having a rainstorm right now, so it's kind of exciting to have different weather here for a change. I, as a sales trainer and a coach specializing in sales, I actually had to pivot last year like everyone. So I was able to go from $0 online to 5 figures a month in online sales. So that's really my passion. Coaches, speakers, and holistic healers hire me to essentially do the same because they just can't quite hit that 5 figure a month income.
Awesome. So I've been telling people for a long time, we have really great speakers at Conference 21, and I'm glad I hit upon this weekly roundtable idea so I can show them all off, because as you can see, we have some really exciting people with us today. So the format of the show is that each of our guests, and I'm bringing one too, has a topic that we're going to discuss briefly. So we'll introduce the topic and then kind of have an open roundtable discussion for a few minutes, then on to the next topic. So I actually want to bring something up that's been sort of on my mind first that we'll all talk about, and then we'll go to Lois and then around. I know, Lois, you have to leave a little bit early because you have another podcast to be on, because that's the problem with working with really great people. Everyone wants to see them. So, but we're excited to have you for a bit. But the first thing I want to talk about, so as a coach, I'm always sharing, positive content, sometimes a little bit challenging to people, saying, you can control your destiny, you have opportunities, your life is based on choices, crazy ideas. And I will sometimes get pushback from people who are almost offended by that concept that people's lives are the result of their choices. And I understand that, if you have a disability, if you're a single mother, if you're a undocumented immigrant, you have far more limited choices than others. But there seem to be people who really want to push a narrative of most people in America don't control their destiny. And I think there's some political angle to it. They want to kind of use that to justify political reform because everything's really terrible. But I'd love to get kind of your thoughts on if it's that most people are really under the heel of big corporate America, or if it's more of a self-fulfilling prophecy of people who believe that they don't control their lives. Anyone
Mindset.
To jump in and comment? Yeah. Go ahead.
Definitely a mindset. It doesn't. My clients come to me, and every now and then I'll get one that will push back on that, and they pay me good money to convince them that the only issue they have, they always think it's somebody else, Big Brother, it's staff, my boss, it's somebody or something else, but it's never their fault. My job basically is to come in is it possible that it's just you have a mindset issue that doesn't agree with you and it's not aligned with your career, your life? And is it possible? Once they give me that, yeah, it's possible, then let's go from there. Because if it's impossible, well, I'll shake your hand. We got nothing else to do. And this is a coach or train people who are unwilling to open their minds. So it is a mindset issue. Once they realize the possibilities that there may be incorrect, I want to say wrong. CEOs, owners of companies and business don't want to be wrong. But once they realize there's another alternative out there, and that's where I specialize, I try to use science because when I deal with the C-suits of the big corporations, they don't want metaphysical, they don't want philosophical. Why do you validate that suggestion on that statement you made, Mr. Perez? How do you validate that? Well, the sciences of neuro or genetics and this and that. Oh, okay. He's an expert. Let's listen.
I would say it a different way from Angelus because I'm a communications training company with a storytelling twist is the tagline that I like to say. And oftentimes I will coach folks and I will have them tell the story of this limiting belief that they have.
Yep.
And I will teach them a specific storytelling technique that is, the spine of the story. It starts with once upon a time. Once upon a time, this happened to me. And because of that, and this is how my life has turned out. And then I have them go back and plug in at a certain point, which would be the climax of a story, how their life would turn out differently.
Exactly.
Okay. We tell ourselves stories. Everybody on this call does. I don't care what Angelus says. He has his limiting beliefs. I'm sorry to break it to you, Angelus.
Oh, I agree.
All right. I do. Everybody does because we have stories that we have to break through. But the power of story is that when we realize, oh, that's just something I made up in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I can challenge myself to do it. Now, to what Angelus has said, there is brain science behind it because we have to tell ourselves a different story very, very often in order for our brain to not automatically go to the story we've been telling ourselves since we were 6 years old or whatever it is.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with Bridget. And I want to add that, in some ways we're not in control, okay? Because we're not in control of all the events that happen in the world. There are events that happen that we didn't do anything to create. Maybe you grew up in an abusive home and you had a father that locked you in the closet, or maybe you had a terrific accident that changed your whole life, or maybe, whatever. We don't control all of the events in our lives. However, there comes a time where we respond. Sometimes we respond by telling stories that in the moment save our lives, and they really need to help us through that minute. But there's our response. So there's the event, there's our response, and the response is going to create the outcome. So at some point, when you look at a situation, whether it's in your business or in your personal life or relationships, if you don't like what you see, then you can't go back and change the event. What can you change? You can change your choice about what your response is going to be. You can change what you do from here on out. And as far as that is true, then you really are in control of the future, and you really can create a completely new outcome for yourself.
And if I can, all of that was amazing, and I'll just be really brief because you all said a lot of the same stuff that I probably would have said. For me, knowing that, the American dream, what is that really? The picket white fence, the cars, the 2.2 kids, the mortgage, all the things that were programmed, working for other people, not believing in yourself enough to go out on your own and do that, right? And I think the pandemic, blew a lot of that up. Now people are forced to go out and find their way, speak their truth. That happened to me. I was selling for all these other companies, making them millions, because I was still, even though I was a salesperson, I thought I worked for myself, but I was hiding behind someone else's dream. So I was able to break through that, and a lot more layers to that, of course, but it was so liberating. And I was like, oh my God, even I was programmed, right? to live someone else's dream. So for me, that was a huge thing that I see a lot of people struggling with. And that's why they would rather stay in the safe, almost scarcity mindset of a steady paycheck and a job, which I know, Michael, you're passionate about that topic as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, mostly just because I'm not very good at getting a steady paycheck, so I don't think anyone else should either. No. Honestly, I joke that I'm constitutionally incapable of getting a regular job. It's mostly I won't jump through the hoops that it takes to get a regular job. And I shared a post recently on Facebook about this thing about jobs that don't post the salary range even, but expect you to fill out a 10-page application and a resume and a background check and whatever to get to the interview to find out what they might pay you. And where else in any market in the world would you expect someone to go through that much work just to find out what the offer is, let alone see if there's a match? It's a crazy thing. So actually, off what Lois said, that pivots well to, I did find a list of topics finally. To Lois, the topic you wanted to bring in is pivoting in the new normal. So you talked about how COVID kind of brought some interesting non-discretionary life events, I think is what Michael O'Brien calls them, if I'm not mistaken. So pivoting in the new normal, talk a little bit about the topic you wanted to bring to us today.
Awesome. And is it allowed and it's not the F word, but can I swear on here? Is that okay?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's just YouTube and Facebook. So,
so I don't know about you, but I got my ass kicked in 2020 and just woke up one day never having sold online. I mean, I had, some replicated websites. I had a few things, but I had a, love-hate relationship with Facebook. I didn't have really much of a presence on LinkedIn. I didn't have landing pages. I didn't have a podcast. I didn't have an email list. All these, in my mind, they're like, I don't need to do that. That's beneath me. I was all face-to-face, belly-to-belly, kneecap to kneecap. And once that was taken away, it was like, oh my God, what do I do, right? And so being able to find coaches to overcome those fears I already alluded to that were really holding me back. Like I wanted to launch a podcast like 4 years ago, but I was terrified of the idea. And now I have a podcast that's over 100 episodes in, and it's building a tribe, building a community online, which was the antithesis of what I ever thought I would do. Right. So I'm grateful for this pandemic and how it's opened up my mind, and I think created a lot of new opportunities for people to build their tribes, find their voice, be seen, be heard, and be paid, probably maybe even for the first time what you're really worth. And for me, that was what this offline to online pivot has done for me and most of my clients.
Yeah,
so I don't know
I think
if
the
you have any
pandemic
questions or thoughts.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think the pandemic definitely it blew a lot of things up, and when I talk about minimum wage, sometimes people object that if you raise the minimum wage, we'll lose jobs, and I believe that someone's better off unemployed than underemployed, because if you're underemployed, then it's not serious enough to need to take action. You're like, oh, well, I've got a job. It's not the great job, but it's a job. When you're unemployed, you're like, okay, house is on fire. We need to act now. Like, I need a job. I need to take action. And I think the same thing in 2020. Everyone who's in that, like, I can live with this for a bit kind of state, lived with it, but suddenly they couldn't live with it anymore. And now they had to take action. And a lot of people, once I'm certainly one of them, once everything got blown up, they're like, oh, I didn't want to be, I want to be over there.
100%. Yeah, I have another fun story. Unless anybody else wants to add, I don't want to. I don't want to keep going. If you guys, I'd love to hear for you what pivoting the new normal from offline to online has maybe done for you.
Well, it's a catch-22, right? So I do a lot of workshops I was doing a lot of workshops in person, which is the purpose of my business, because when you're talking about interpersonal communication, it's, in some ways it's better to do it when you're actually in person. But having said that, there's value. I had a former client call me last week who's in a new job, and he's like, I can't bring you back now, but I want you to come back in at some point because the session you did for us a year and a half ago was just amazing. And I said, great. And I said, one thing you may want to think about is that I've pivoted, and all of the exercises and interactive games that we used to play, that we played when we were in that workshop, I can now do those online. And so that actually saves you money because you don't have to fly me to South Carolina and put me up in a hotel and feed me and pay for my parking and everything else. Now, as much as I would like to get the heck out of the damn house, right? He's not going to be able to do that until after the pandemic is over. And yet there would be a possibility that we could help with some of the things that are going on within his corporation if we did it, via Zoom or StreamYard or whatever.
I totally agree with Bridget when she says, I remember when COVID started, and a lot of my clients, I've been telling them for years, now it's time to, walk your talk. You should use the, what technology softwares you have now to limit commuting. You'll save a lot on the gas, the resources, the setup. You might not need all the, your office administrator won't need to work as hard, and all the reasons I gave. No, never. We don't need this. Why change? We've been this way forever. Why should we change? And then COVID came and changed the whole game. So then they come to me and they're asking, what are we going to do? How are we going to function? This and that. I said, remember those softwares? Remember those things I told you to do before? Now is your time to really jump into them and focus on them. The clients of mine who took it in and made it part of the system, they come back now and said, we've done better during the COVID than we did the previous year. How is that possible? And we want to stay this way when it's all over, because we realized how much we were saving when we reduced all this traveling and all sending people here and there. Now, on the other side on the unfortunate side, I have only a couple of clients that refuse. They said, well, wait until the normal comes back. And I said, you're going to need to be the trendsetter. You need to be the template for your competitors. You got to be the ones showing others this is the way to go. If you stay still, you're not going to survive. And those two have already closed down the business, which is kind of sad. It wasn't necessary. So Bridget made a fine point about it's going to a new normal that's not the same. And even though, let's say COVID is going to end, we go back to traveling and going face to face. For me personally, my wife and I found the company some years back, and it was half and half traveling, meeting in person. I'm a communication a coach, so to me, how do I communicate to people through this thing? To text, to post it. So I had to raise to the challenge. So I went and looked up my own coaches. I said, listen, can you teach me how to use this stuff called social media? Because I use it partially, but it's only a hobby. How do you use it to get to my clients? And they said, oh, you can make lots of money doing this and that. I'm like, what? How do you make money with Instagram? Facebook? You don't make money with Facebook. YouTube, that's just for entertainment. What are you talking about? And these coaches are like half my age. So they're the millennials, and they're telling me, this is what you got to do. And once I started applying it, I said, got to get this to my clients. So that is the new norm. Like my clients, we did better this year than the last 3 years. So the new normal is now.
Yeah. And like Angelus, I'm busier than ever right now. Like Michael, I feel I have to apologize because I have not been on any of the, like I was going to be on a Zoom yesterday for this conference and something came up and you contacted me a week or so. And I'm like, Michael, I'm triple booked at that time. I can't even. So there's opportunity there. And as Michael knows, I do in all of my work, I use improvisational techniques, and I teach a free improv class for communication twice a month. And Michael used to come over to where I taught it prior to the pandemic. Well, now that I'm teaching it online, back in December, I had people on one call. We had 2 people from India, 1 from Romania, one from England, and 1 from Portugal.
Wow.
And so those people weren't going to show up in Groton, Connecticut, right?
Mhm.
So I'm never going back. It's a loss leader that I teach, that I give 2 hours a month to bring business in. And the fact that I've been able to make that pivot has helped, because you never know when one of those people is going to say, this is great, and I happen to work for this company or know somebody. And so that ability to just stay nimble, as we like to say in the business community, is really important.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bridget. To kind of just take off what Coach Lois was saying, there's just an incredible opportunity to innovate right now. And part of it is that, I've been coaching on Zoom for over 4 years, and 99% of my coaching engagements were by video prior to the pandemic.
Nice.
But on the one-to-one type of coaching and mastermind groups, recognizing that with this new normal of being online, there are just opportunities to innovate. What Bridget was doing with her workshops, with being able to bring exercises to make things interactive, to really be more than just faces talking on the screen. There are just opportunities now that there weren't before. And so when you think about making the most of your future, the questions can be, what are we learning from this that we can use to grow our businesses? What are we learning to better serve the people we're trying to serve?
Well, this event is a great example of that.
I was going to say, along those lines, like the reason we're all here together, Conference21 can only exist in a virtual format. Some people have asked, so is it going to be in person when we come back? I'm like, how am I going to bring together speakers from all across North America, and eventually I'm sure I'll have some from Europe and other continents? How am I going to bring them all together at a price point anywhere like $21? It's not possible. You got to fly everyone in. You got to get hotel rooms, the whole thing. We're able to do something amazing like this because of the virtual space, and people are willing to go because they're getting used to being online and seeing those kinds of opportunities. So moving on, speaking of, talking about Bridget and her improv, the topic that she sent me is, there it is, having tough conversations and or improv for better communication. I guess it's
having tough conversations is what we posted on the website.
Okay.
And that's what I'm preparing for.
I'm just reading what's in front of me. I'm just like a machine. All right. So having tough conversations and
but we will use
we
will use some tools for improv. So this is this concept came out of a conversation I had with a colleague. He's actually out in Portland, in the Portland area. And we started talking about just how hard it's been in our country lately, and that there's a lot of conversations we need to have. We need to have conversations about race. We need to have conversations about politics. We need to have conversations that honor one another. And so we started talking and comparing notes, and we've done a couple of these sessions together. I'm going to be by myself for this session, but it ended up that I had a local client that called me and said, you know what, we have a situation here that our supervisors don't have tough conversations with their subordinates. Can you come in and help us and teach us how? And so there's a myriad of ways that concept of tough conversations can go forward, right? Because if you're working for a company and you're given a task, but you're not told how to do the task, and then somebody's unhappy with your work, well, somebody didn't have a conversation with you, right? And if you were told how to do it and you didn't do it, you weren't accountable, you didn't actually complete the task, then there's another conversation that needs to happen about accountability. So there's lots of ways that we need to have tough conversations in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and they're tough for a reason, because nobody likes to feel uncomfortable. And if you happen to have an employee that's feeling very, as we were talking about before, that's telling themselves a story about how they are not enough, that they are not whatever the story is, they're going to hear the feedback, no matter how it's given, if it's given just very, plainly, as criticism. And so how do you mitigate that? So that's some of the stuff that we'll be talking about in next weekend.
That's awesome stuff. One of the things that because I know I'm going to have to bounce here in like 7 minutes, Michael. I love that because I'm married to an African, right? I did a podcast episode last year. I lived in the neighborhood before we moved to Southern California. We lived, just a mile away from where George Floyd was murdered. So that was like my home, and I saw it burning, and I was like resonating with that community, and having that conversation on my podcast, of course, I got some feedback, right? So I think taking those risks, and even like probably working with Angelus, is that how you say your name? Angelus, did I say it right?
Angelus, like I'm jealous.
Angelus. Awesome, great. No need to be, although I know I am wearing pink, and that might be your color, so it's all good. Just teasing. But ultimately, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I had a good one. What I've been working on for me, so that I can, because I come from a family completely politically polarizing. I'm the black sheep, right? So for me to work on myself, and reading books like The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer and Untethered Soul, because we always have that chatter, and from my background, always wanting to be right and getting a word in, because that's how I was raised, right? And so I think that's where a lot of it foundationally comes from within. And so Angelus probably could speak on that way more than I can, but reading good books like that and working on ourselves and being silent and still and doing our best to quiet the mind and understand it and just watch those thoughts go by has been tremendous for me, given all of the things that I just said.
That's awesome. And Bridget, what you were saying was so true about there's a lack of knowledge about how to have tough conversations. And part of that is because there's a lack of awareness of the constitutive conversations that have to happen to make a team a safe, innovative place to learn and to work. And so what are the missing conversations that are, completely missing from your organization that keep the alignment from happening and make it more difficult for your leaders to have conversations? If there's real great alignment on the team, if there's alignment on mission, vision, values, and then alignment on how you have conversations and check in, and there, it just makes it so much easier to have those tough conversations. It makes them a lot less tough. So it's important to kind of think about what is it that makes your workplace culture safe, and are you having the necessary conversations to even create that culture to make conversations easier to have.
And the culture is totally important. When Bridget was talking about that tough conversation, the tough conversations really with the leadership, because when I go in there, they're going, well, something's wrong with my staff. Well, my staff is just not efficient enough. They're not proactive enough. Is it possible that you don't communicate to them at all and you expect them to read your brain? And they're like, well, they should just know what I mean. I'm like, see, the mind reading thing. Yes, that's very popular. So I always tell them, try an eminence of presence. That's what I call it. It's a form of communication where try to treat your staff as if they're your own family and your life depends on it. Because technically they do. I'm sorry. Am I doing?
It was me. That was my phone going off.
Oh, no, I thought it was just a timer. I'm like, I speak too long.
Yeah, you're done. You're done.
So, but if these people below you, so to speak, and above you, upper echelons, we're all a team. We're all supposed to work together so we can get paid for the job well done. If you see them as adversary, or you see them as below or above, and you don't see them as part of the machine, then you stop talking to each other. Then animosity comes. And then the people, the staff, start to work hard not to work. So I get them to say, I want you to have conversations with them. I want you to take them in the morning. I want you to go and say, find out. And I give them like a couple of questions to ask, because sometimes they don't even know what to ask. I don't know how to talk to them. I never talk to them. Why should I talk to them now? Ask them these 3 questions. How's their spouse? How's their children? How's their pets? So on. And so then they come back and they go, we had a pleasant conversation for like 20 minutes before we started work. And all day was just, there was no tension. I'm like, and then as time goes on, they start to see, okay, they're part of me. Without them, I don't have a management job or a director's job. And then I reverse it and tell them, okay, now you got to see your upper echelon, your boss, the top dog. This person is also the same way. It's like, but I never talked to them. I said, what's the difference? You're just turning your head. That's all. And then it's amazing how when I do my final reports, when I'm about to leave and I'm talking to the heads of the companies, they're saying, I didn't know she did this, or I didn't know he did that. I didn't know they had these kids. I didn't know they had an accident at home and they lost and I'm like, that just made it so much easier to understand why they may come in late or they may need to leave early or whatever. And it makes working with them much easier.
You're like undercover boss happening.
Yeah, I was going to say, Angelus is undercover boss.
Well, it's like communication goes.
There's a big element to this that goes to trust, which was a word that came up earlier. And for Coach Lois, I'm currently doing some communications training with a group from a major brokerage firm. And one of the things that they are required to do for their homework is call their clients and ask the following question. How are you? 2020 was really, really tough. How are you doing? And they're not allowed to talk finances.
Yes.
If the person brings finances up, they have to say, well, let's set an appointment to go over your portfolio.
Beautiful.
But just check in on them, because one of their complaints is we're not selling enough. Well, you know what? If your people only talk to you when it's time to talk money, they may have a trust in you as to how you're doing with their money, but they don't have that added relationship with you that's going to make you turn around and say, hey, Christine, I've got a great broker for you. Right. And so it makes it harder too for you to ask for the referral.
And let me interrupt for one second, because Lois is heading off to her next interview. But thank you very much, Lois, for being on the show. Don't worry, Bridget, Christine, and are continuing on. Thanks for being on the show, Lois.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
But Bridget, that was a fantastic point about you need to talk to them when you're doing more than just asking them for their money.
Yeah, because then the next time that you when you do have that follow-up call and you go over their portfolio, then it becomes easier for you to say, by the way, if you know anybody who needs our services, please think of us. Absolutely. Right? It's easier for you to ask for the referral, because you have built a relationship that is more than just, a fiduciary one in this particular case.
Yeah. So I used to work with one of my clients was Best Buy, and they asked me to come in and help train their sales force. They're the retail, so they're on the floor all the time. And they had a little script, a little board, and they carried around them. And I started, showing them, okay, I don't want you to go by a script. I want you to talk to your customers, find out what they truly desire for what they're trying to get out of the buy. And the directors will walk by, the managers will walk by, and they'll hear me. And this is only for professionals. Small children shouldn't do this at home. And they'll hear me cussing at the customer. And I'm at the cash register, and they had to teach me how to use it. I'm like, so I'm pretending to be one of the reps there. And it's funny you said undercover. This is actually the undercover part. So I'm talking to the customer, and they hear nothing but 4 little words coming out of my mouth. I sound male chauvinist to the missus, and they said, Angelus, is there a problem with? I said, no, there's no problem. Why you ask? I hear you yelling and swearing at the customers. I go, yeah, but I'm making the sales. And they're going, yeah, but you can't talk to customers that way. I said, are you kidding me? Talk to them. And he did. He didn't trust it. And they found out they dubbed me as one of the best best salesperson in their store. And then they came back and asked, how does that work? I go, because I got to know them. And I got to know them so well that they treated me like family. So when they were giving me the razz, like, oh, can you give me a better discount? Come on, I just gave you the best discount. Tom, don't be an ass. Come on. And he's like, you're right. You did give me the best discount. So they then bought more because they're buying from family. They're not buying from someone trying to sell them. And I didn't have a script. And they told me, I mean, half the customers that came in said, I hate those scripts. When someone comes up to me, I already know that I don't want to talk to them.
I used to be a really good waitress back in my college days because I was able to read people well enough to know who at the table could I joke with and rag on.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Right. And
Yes.
if I set the right sarcastic mark and broke the whole table apart,
You
like,
got
you got him, he's the guy, right? I got a bigger tip.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. But to Angelus's point, I actually always appreciate. I've bought 2 computers now at Best Buy, and I've done my research before I walk in the door. But I appreciate the fact that when you go in and you say, I'm looking for a computer, what's the first question they ask, Angelus?
It's been a few years since I haven't been to Best Buy, but
Damn it, you missed your opportunity there. It's what do you want to do with it?
Yes.
And so 2020 happened to be the year that all of my technical devices decided to fail. Right. So I walked in and I said, okay, I've done my research and I want this computer, but I want to order it because I need an upgraded processor and upgraded, upgraded space. And the guy looked at me and he was like, what are you going to do with it? And I said, well, I do a lot of graphic design work and I sometimes do video editing. And he's like, oh, okay. Because he's used to the customer that's just surfing the internet and writing documents, right? And so he was prepared to say to me, you don't need to spend that extra $200. In my case, I did need to spend the extra $200 because part of my business, I do e-learning. And so I have, times when I'm doing heavy duty graphic work and editing and things like that.
Nice.
So that's a get to knowing, that's a listening. One of the things, and Christine knows this to be absolutely true, the biggest barrier to communication is lack of listening.
Critical listening skill.
Yeah. So there's a quote from Senator Lyndon Johnson who said, you ain't learning nothing when you're talking.
Very well said. Oh, did we lose her?
We lost her.
And Johnson's ghost came in and said, wait a minute.
Oh, she dropped the mic. She dropped the mic. It was such a good quote. It was like, I'm out of here.
I was about to hand it off to her, and so your topic, but she's not here. But she'll be back in a second. In the meantime, Bridget, to your point, I've sold many cars that way as well. That when someone come in, what do you want it for? What do you need it for? And it's amazing because most car salesmen don't ask that. Welcome back, Christine.
I had a little bit of a hiccup in my internet here.
Yeah, we're figuring you just kind of drop the mic. That you're like, Lyndon Johnson quote, and I'm out.
There you go. There you go.
But one quick thing I wanted to mention, then we'll go to Christine's topic about getting innovative. Is we talk about those tough political conversations. I think I've become a much better listener through years of working as a salesman because a good salesman has no political opinions. You get very good at saying, it's very interesting that you believe that, or you seem to be very passionate about that, or any number of other things that leave them the space to believe I agree with them without actually saying anything. And so, someone will go off on a rant about Obama or Trump or whatever, and I'd say, that's you seem to have thought a lot about this. And it leaves them the space to be like, oh, he's nodding. He must like me. I'm like, yeah, sure I do. Anyway, sign here. But in doing that practice, it gives you it's given me the instinct of when someone says something political, not to respond immediately, but to have to stay quiet and then to listen and be like, where's that coming from? Because some people say some things that you really got to dig deep to figure out where it's coming from. But once you look at that, you're like, oh, and then, out of curiosity, I'll look at what media they're watching. And I'll look at what Facebook groups they're in. And I'll say, oh, if I was consuming this media and I was basing it on this fact set, sure, I might also believe the same thing. So, understanding where people are coming from is huge in sales and in family and in any other form of communication. But before since time is roaming on, I want to get on to Christine's topic, which is, assuming I lined this up right, getting innovative. Is that the right one?
Right. And actually, Michael, listening is a key part of it. I'm going to dive deep into, in the short time that we have at the conference, 4 keys to creating a culture for innovation. And a lot of what we're talking about is really important in that. But the study that was done by Google called Project Aristotle identified a gateway characteristic of innovative teams, effective and innovative teams, and that's psychological safety. And we're going to break down what is psychological safety. Really that ability for that team to get past these communication issues so that they can spend their energies not like posturing to look good for the boss, so that they're actually spending their energies and their brain power coming up with new solutions. And anybody who's got a team, and even for an individual, to create this environment is going to make a huge difference in where are people investing their energy, and are they coming up with solutions to meet the needs? Part of it's doing the listening. Part of it is, being able to have ideas and have somebody not shoot them down the minute that they say them. So there's a lot to what we've been talking about here that goes into this culture of innovation that we're going to break down. And I think for people listening, one of the things to think about now is breaking out of the mold. We have an opportunity that's unparalleled, actually, to stop doing things just because it's the way we've always done it, and to start looking around to see what people need, to start telling new stories, to start really listening. And I have clients that had breakthrough years in 2020. I've had clients that had years that were far beyond their imagination that they could have, because they were willing to take this risk of trying new things. And it's a very fun time to be in business.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I to Christine and Angelus was making this point earlier. It was probably pretty early on, back in June or July. I read this article about this whole concept of pivoting, and it was a guy who is a vacuum salesman, and he sells these heavy duty vacuums that for like hotels and corporations that are robotic, so you can set them up and they'll do like the whole hallway on their own, and they're very expensive. They cost like $6,000. So the pandemic hits, and his whole job was traveling. I've got to come to your place and I got to show you how the vacuum works, right? It's the what was the name? It's Electrolux of the 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so figuring out how to do that was tough at first, but what he started doing was doing live streams and Zoom, where he'd set up an added camera that could show what the vacuum was doing, and his sales continued to go up, because what did people need during the pandemic? Cleaning things.
Mhm.
right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was an interesting article about working remotely and how companies who really thought they could not operate in a remote scenario are now forced to operate in that remote scenario. And I will tell you too, Michael, I got a client of mine called and their company has merged, and she said to me, we're still shaking things out, but is there any way you might consider a job down the line? And I was like, well, who knows? Talk to me at that point. But the condition is I'm staying where I live
Mhm.
because I love where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that company, that's feasible.
That's right.
And so, if that opportunity comes, maybe I'll consider it, maybe I won't. But it goes to what we're talking about when we open up to other ideas,
Yes.
other things may pop up.
Right. And, a lot of companies have faced issues with transitioning to remote work.
Yes.
But the companies that kind of figured out this culture of safety in advance, and, there have been companies working remotely for a, decade.
That's right.
Who really work remotely well. And so it's not so much about the technology, it's about this culture that you create. And if you don't know how to create this culture, then what you're doing now is struggling because you not only don't know how to create a culture of safety and a culture for innovation, but you're now struggling with how to do it when you're not even in proximity and can't pretend you had a good culture. So there's no more pretending that there's not a culture problem anymore when you really are trying to bring it all together. So there's some great learning coming up at the conference to help you with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Those bosses that are used to standing over your shoulder and be like, do this, do that. Are you in your chair? Those are the ones who are really having trouble. And they're trying to hack it. Be like, I want you to leave your camera on so I can watch you work. Like, wow. You just went from bad to worse on that one.
And there are horror stories. I mean, there's horror, the pandemic has disproportionately affected women the most. And there are some horror stories of women who quit their job because their bosses were offended that their kid walked in the room mid-meeting.
Wow.
And how dare you? Well, you know what?
It's
I'm a mom. I have kids, and my best friend, she's a vice president, a lawyer at a major corporation, and she said the first time my son walked in the room during a meeting, I was mortified, and then 3 months later, he walked in and he was doing the mummy dance behind me, and I was like, oh, that's Wyatt.
nice.
Yeah.
And everybody laughed, and we went on with the meeting.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the difference between seeing people as human beings and
Yes.
being open to the vulnerability and the communication and seeing people as robots who do work.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bridget, I actually address changes that are impacting women disproportionately in my new revision of my book that's coming out again in May, I think, Life Beyond Me Too. And really, when people want a deeper dive and a little more information about that, but the 1 million+ women who've left the workforce because there isn't that extra support, that safety, being able to be yourself and be a human and be a mom while, and so check that out if you're, are looking for some resources on creating that kind of safety for your team.
Well, the biggest innovation really when it comes to COVID is people adapting a new philosophy of how work has to be done. They're so stuck in doing it one way. They're afraid. They're afraid to change because change is scary. It's not safe if it's unknown. Why should I think a different way, be a different way? And you have to explain to them. It's like, what's it all about? Bottom line. What's it all about? It is your bottom line. You want to improve profits. You want to decrease inefficiencies and improve productivity and get the supplies in. What if I told you by simply modifying your behavior, you can double or triple that? and then they start to, okay, because you're talking about money now, you're talking their language.
Absolutely.
And if you start talking their language, that's an innovation right there. Because I've had a lot of clients, and I've been like you, 10 years ago, hey, why don't you use this technology? Why don't you, this will make it so much easier. Your costs will go down. No, we can't do that. We got to fight that, because that's not the way. And if I get my C-suites clients, some of them are like control freaks. And when you say, okay, now that I got to do this long distance, how do I control that? I said, the same way you did before, but you're going to show a little bit more trust. I'm like, trust? Yeah, it's much easier to control that now than it was before. You're going to get more work done. That's the innovation right there. The innovation of a business owner or one of a solopreneur entrepreneur, first time, or they've been well established, and they have to start seeing, how do I market differently? How do I sell differently? It's just a learning skill. And that's all I tell people. You learn the ABCs, you learn to tie your shoes. This is not any harder. So I totally agree with you, Christine.
Yeah. Well, the opportunities are there everywhere. And, when in a condition where, you're not dealing with discrepancies, disagreements between people because of discrimination, right? Everybody's included. Women are included. Moms are included. Dads are included. People of color, it doesn't matter what color, you're included, and you're included, and you have equal status because you're human, right? And then you have the permission to make changes, to learn, to adapt, to contribute. And so this is where innovation happens. And when somebody's got an authoritarian type of authoritative structure, it's not going to work anymore. We have to break that mold, because you're actually going to lose people who will go work somewhere else, because we're not going to tolerate it anymore. So there's some learning to be done to create that environment that you need to get the results that you need to have. And it does impact your bottom line. Absolutely.
Especially millennials, Christine.
Oh, millennials.
They won't stand for it. They saw their parents suffer through jobs that they hated, and they don't want to do that.
Right. So people will leave.
That, others of us didn't. And so they would rather just figure, well, I'll just find another job. I'll go someplace else. I'll find the culture that I want to work in.
Yeah. And if you're an employer that's spending $60,000, $70,000 to replace somebody every year, it's costing you a lot not to learn some culture things. So show up at the conference. You're going to learn some stuff.
And beyond that, thinking about, because you hear stories about, I don't often work or I've spent very little time in the corporate environment, but I read a lot about women being talked over at meetings, or a woman will have an idea and then someone will step on it. And when bosses realize that idea that got stepped on could have been the next $1 million idea, that's what they have to realize, is that it's not just a diversity issue and a fairness issue. It's, you may have just blown your next $1 million idea because the woman at your competitor who also had the same idea didn't get talked over in the meeting, and yours did. And so they're beating in a market because they listened to or worse yet, that woman goes to your competitor because she knows they have a better culture and won't get talked over in meetings. So it's not just a frou better worlds, fair to everyone. It's a make more money. As Angelus was saying, this is about your bottom line. When you're fair to your employees, you're fair to your shareholders.
Yeah,
I got to meet Mary Kay before she passed away, when she was doing a lecture in Texas. Let me just say quickly. So she basically said, listen, there's about 1,000, this is pre-COVID, of course, there's 1,000 businesses born every day. And out of those thousands of businesses, legal businesses, 3 or 5 years later, 90% of them go out of business. And then the 10% that are left, 90% of them are run by women. Then she told me how in her time, when women were not respected, they might be more intelligent, might be more resourceful, more innovative, but put next to a man with less, the man got paid more. She couldn't even she had to get her 18-year-old son to co-sign for because he was male. So for her business. So this tells me a lot. She taught me. So when I go into corporations and I see that it's kind of imbalanced, never mind minorities, but you don't have enough women here. You want to be successful. And they go, what is that a chauvinistic statement you're making? He says, no. Women have a different way, a different approach than men. Obviously, we both have the other side of the coin. If we come together, you have a full coin. And you have to work together instead of looking at it as like, it's only one way of doing it. Look at another perspective. Yes, and then you get to the minorities. They have a different perspective because they're from a different culture. You get all those cultures and you take their suggestions, and then you can make a better informed decision as a leader of the company, that is. That's very true, Christine.
Yeah. And from a communication standpoint, one of the reasons I have my company was I was on a toxic team at my last corporation where I was a woman with an opinion and that wasn't valued. And so I did great work. Everybody knew that I did great work, but there was a lot of things involved. There was a lot of male toxicity. And so I became eventually the odd man out, because I'd show up every day and I'd be miserable. And so that I just added to the toxicity of the team. So one of the reasons I do what I do is because I don't want other people to go through that. But the gender bias isn't just having women in certain places. It's also allowing women to be just as assertive, as aggressive, as have an opinion as a man.
Yeah.
And we still have a long way to go with that, in that, if I say something in a certain tone of voice, it's considered, I'll let you fill in the B word. But if Michael or Angelus says it in that same tone of voice,
Well, if you don't want to suffer the 10 million loss that Pinterest paid out in 2020 because of bias, you better check out, check out the inclusion safety. That's like the lowest level. And we're going to talk about this in my talk at the conference, inclusion safety. And that's everybody has a seat at the table. Everybody's involved. Everybody's invited. Everybody is equally capable of contributing something to your organization. And whether they're male, female, brown, white, black, purple, they've got something to bring. And if you're leading and you don't offer that, it's going to cost you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And actually, so we're coming to the end of our hour. I do want to go around, everyone talk about what they're going to be talking about at the conference. I do want to make just one final comment, talk about diversity and inclusion. And when I was making the Conference21 website, and of course, if you look at conference21.com, which everyone should look at conference21.com, that's where you get your tickets. But you'll see pictures of all the speakers. And I was looking at it and saying, there's a lot of women and a fair amount of diversity. But the way that I achieve the diversity we have is I put out a call for good speakers who are knowledgeable in their topic. And sure enough, there are good speakers who are women and good speakers who are men and good speakers who are white and Hispanic and black. And I think it could be more diverse and hopefully will be, as we go on. But I think it came out pretty well simply by accepting people entirely based on what they have, because there's some great knowledge across all demographics. And so a lot of people talk about like, how do we get diverse people? When I worked for Best Version Media, they had a very diverse publishing team. And they said the way we achieve a diverse publishing team is we don't know anything about you until you show up for training. Like we don't know how old you are. We don't know what your race is. We only interview you on the phone. And you look around the room and it's a really diverse room because surprisingly, great people are across all demographic lines. So it's just a matter of enabling that and keeping them, make them feel welcome. So, so Christine, you talked a little bit about what you'll be talking about, but just quickly, 30 seconds to a minute, share what you'll be talking about at the conference and why people want to come and see you.
So if you're leading a company and you want to stay competitive in our ever-changing VUCA environment, there's so much change happening. Your company needs to be able to innovate. And in order to innovate, you have to have a culture that supports that. So what we're talking about is creating a culture of innovation for your company, for your teams that are going to allow conversations to happen, that are going to allow breakthroughs to happen. where you're supporting that. And at the top, as the leader, you need to model the things that I'm going to be talking about. So if you don't know what supports that culture of innovation, you need to be at this talk.
Awesome. And Angelus, what will you be talking about?
I will be talking about what it is that creates so many clients coming to me crying, frustrated, angry, almost belligerent, because they have bought into, was it the other speaker that left, bought into this belief, this maybe American dream, this idea that if they do this, if they're solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, to have their own business, that'll give them the lifestyle, but it didn't give them the lifestyle. And they're tired of it. Or, they want to blow it up because they don't want to really blow it up, but they're tired of not having a life. And then when you got the employees and corporations, they got the what I call the crazy action. They think by taking more action, keep working, that they'll get to where they were promised, and they're not getting there. They're exhausted. They're frustrated. They want to quit their job. So it's a balance between the life first, then the job should reflect and surround it and support it, not the other way around. If you're not living your life the minute you get the job, you're not taking the job for the real reason why you took it the first time. And that's the bottom line.
Very good. And Bridget, I'll give you the last word, sharing what you'll be talking about.
Oh, thank you, Michael. So we're going to have an interactive session on how to have tough conversations. What constitutes a tough conversation, why they're hard, how people may receive information that you give them, whether you give it to them kindly or not. Sometimes it's all about their perception and not about how you actually say it, but how to say it in a way that is constructive, and how to better listen to what Michael was talking about. We were all talking about earlier. So that's what we will do, and we're going to actually play some games. Yay. In that. We'll use the tool of improv to play some games and have some fun and learn things about each other that open up these tough conversations.
Excellent.
Fun. All right. Well, thank you all for being on the show this week. I look forward to seeing you all, or seeing many of you at the conference. And of course, everyone can get their tickets at conference21.com. I want to thank turn my chair the right way. There we go. Thank our main sponsor, AmSpirit Business Connections, who's one of our primary sponsor and sponsoring our keynote speaker, Matt Ward. So exciting to have them as part of this, and I appreciate their faith that they had very early on in this process. We're getting it together. So thank you all for watching, and if you don't have your tickets yet, please get them. If you do have your tickets, share the link with your friends so they can get their tickets too. And thank you, of course, to all of our guests, to Bridget, Angelus, and Christine, who everyone will get to see next week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael.
Looking forward to talking to you all. Seeing you soon.